Hello, this is Aira. This class is normally done as a hands-on class at our shop for people who have purchased some of the baby lock searchers. So this is the one that I'll go through pretty much on the basics, even if you never used the searcher before. And if you have, maybe this will just be a little refresher. So the searcher models that we cover on this class in our shop are those baby locks models that have the air jet threading or extraordinary threading, and also no tension dials, what we call the automatic thread delivery system. And you can tell those machines by the area where you normally would have your tension dials. In this picture, there is one model, the Celebrate, or the earlier version was called Eclipse. That one has tension dials. This we will do partially, some parts of this presentation will be applicable for that, but normally these machines with the manual tension dials, we do them as a separate class because the tension dials will give us a little bit extra complexity. So we will really concentrate on the machines that are all these others, starting from Imagine all the way to the Triumph. Well, just a little history. Babylock was the company who brought the searchers for the home market. And here are some pictures that I've gotten from the Babylock educators about the first prototypes since 1963. So they looked quite a bit different than the searchers we have currently. In 1967, they brought up a machine that was actually mass produced. Again, still very different what the current searchers are. But Babylock's been doing searchers for a long time, so they have the most advanced, most user-friendly searchers in the market. So we tend to be very biased in our shop about the searchers. We really like the Babylock searchers. Well, what is different in a searcher compared to a sewing machine? Well, one of the things that you notice that if you hit that pedal all the way down, your searcher will go a lot faster than most sewing machines. Yes, we do have some sewing machines in the household that we can go up to 1500 stitches a minute, but most sewing machines do not go that fast. They are almost about half a speed. Um, so of course we still have the control in the searcher using the pedal. If you just push it a little bit, it will go slower, but they do go faster. The commercial ones, they go really fast. Actually, commercially, they don't really call them searchers. They call them overlockers or overlock machines. So that's just another name for the four-thread searcher that we refer in the home market. Then there are also cover stitch searchers, which are then the really different type of stitching. In this class, I'm really mostly covering just the overlock side and just some basic techniques. Um, Other difference compared to only sewing machine is that we can have at the same time multiple needles in the machine. Depending on the model and depending on the stitch we are using, we may have one needle in the machine or two needles, or then a couple of the Babylock models we can even put up to 5 needles at the same time. Yes, in a sewing machine I can put the double needle or triple needle, but that's still one shank that then separates into different needles. You can't use those needles in the searcher. Those double needles, triple needles are sewing machine only. But in the searchers, these are individual needles. So we have different places for these different needles. So that's again a bit different. And maybe one of the most obvious difference is that we have all the threads in the machine on the top of the machine. There are no bobbins, which is really yeehaw, good news. We never run out of bobbin thread. We don't have one. So instead of bobbins, we have loopers. Again, depending on the model, some machines may have 2 loopers, some 3. If you have a machine that is cover stitch only, it has only 1 looper, so it's a cover looper. But any of the machines that are the overlockers, the overlock machines, those ones we have upper looper and a lower looper. So 2 of those ones. And I have a picture later showing what they look like. Then one more very different thing is that there is a knife. Actually, the knife has 2 blades. There's a stationary blade and a moving blade. And the knife cuts that fabric just before it's sewn. Well, lots of times I get a question, can I just unlock that knife so I don't have to cut it and then I can sew in the middle of it? I said, can't go too far in the fabric with the overlock machine because those loopers, they go over the edge. That's kind of the overlocks. It kind of goes over the edge of the fabric. So if I turn my knife off, I'm going to have those loopers going over that bigger piece of fabric edge. And if I really stuff a lot of fabric in it, it's going to jam the machine. So no, most times I leave my knife on, even if I'm not cutting. I just use it as a guide. But there are a few techniques that I want to unlock the upper blade, the moving blade. And I will go later some of those techniques where we use that one. But most times we want to have the knife moving, so it's just kind of what's the knife. On one class I took, the educator said that when you search, you don't want to look the needle. It's a kind of same as in the sewing machine. Most times you want to have some kind of a other point that you look at. In search, the point I normally look is the knife, because that is kind of like you drive in a car. You don't want to watch the hood ornament. You want to watch the road. So needle is your hood ornament, and knife in the searcher is your road. So what's the knife? And then other really, again, very unique thing in the searchers is that we have stitch fingers to support the fabric edge while it's been sewn. And what those stitch fingers do is they are the places where the stitches are formed. So searchers don't even need fabric to do a stitch. They are perfectly happy to do stitching on a thread on its own. And we use that function to make tassels. On the sewing machine, yeah, I can sew maybe a little bit between two pieces of fabric without any fabric. The threads just get twisted on each other. But if I start without any fabric in a sewing machine, I can't go too far because sewing machines really need fabric to create the stitch. Searchers, however, they don't even need the fabric. So those stitch fingers are where the stitches are formed. And when we put fabric on top of it, that stitch then gets transferred onto the fabric while the feed dogs feed the fabric forward. And there are multiple fingers, and I'll have little pictures that show later, and on the live machine later I'll show also some of those pointed areas. Another unique feature in the searcher is that we have feed dogs that are in two parts. Sewing machine feed dogs, there may be multiple pieces in it, but that is one unit. Searchers at the feed dogs are two separate units, and we can control the ratio, how much the front feed dogs are taking the fabric in versus the back taking it out. And that is referred as a differential feed. So it is a very unique feature, and I'll show later a sample where we are using that differential feed in 3 different techniques. Well, here's a picture that shows on a Baby Lock Triumph searcher some of the details. If you have a searcher that doesn't have the cover stitch side of it, you just won't have the chain looper. I can hear that you see the chain looper. That's an extra thing on the 8-thread searchers, which would be on the current line, the Accolade and the Triumph. And then on the past models, Ovation, Evolution, and Evolve Wave. Those ones have 3 loopers. All others, we have only 2. So we have the upper looper that lays the fabric, the thread on the top of the fabric. We have the lower looper that lays the thread on the bottom of the fabric. They're kind of like a knitting needles. They kind of cross over each other, and then the needle threads will tack that stitch down. So those looper threads never go through the fabric. And that is really cool because we can put heavier threads on these loopers for the pretty decorative edges, because these threads don't go through the fabric. The needle threads, they do go, so that one we can't put super heavy, but we can put some of the little bit thicker ones there too. But loopers quite a bit more thick. So upper and lower looper, and then yeah, this is the chain looper, which we don't worry about this class. Here's the cutting blade, and you see the blade in this picture. That's the moving blade. And behind there is a stationary blade. It's a little bit harder to see, but we need 2 blades. And these blades are made out of different material. The moving one is a little bit softer metal, so it's the sacrificial one. Eventually the blade will get dull, and that is the one that we need to replace. Then if you damage, if you sew over a pin, which that is one thing in a searcher, never, ever, ever, never, ever, did I say never, sew over pins if possible, because that will definitely damage at least your moving knife but it also may damage even your stationary blade. I normally like to use the Clover clips because they are really a good knife savers, because I can't sew over those ones. But sometimes I do like to use pins. And when I use pins, I use the really long flower head pins that I see the pin head, that I can pull it before I get to the blade. But if I accidentally sew over the pin with my serger, that pin will make a little nick in here on this blade, and it can't be filed away. Most times we had to replace the blade. Luckily the machines come with a spare, so in case you did this one over the weekend and we are closed in the shop, so then you can still replace the knife and get going. But if you really hit it hard, you may have damaged the lower blade, and that is something that you may have to bring the machine for service and us to replace that one. Eventually, those blades get dull also. It's like scissors. Often I get the question when I need to replace the blade, and I always say, if I knew that, I would know the winning lottery numbers too. No, I don't have the crystal ball for that. But it's kind of same as your scissors. And depending on how much you use, obviously, but also what kind of materials you are cutting. If I'm sewing very lightweight cotton batiste and I maybe just barely trim off the edge, overcasting the fabric, I don't really dull the knife very much. But if I'm sewing heavier nylons and really cutting off big heavier thicknesses of fabric, yeah, it will dull it much faster. But you can tell when your knife needs to be replaced. It's like same as what your fabric scissors. When your scissors are dull and you try to cut, they don't cut nicely. They just kind of chew the fabric and just not really going through easily. That's exactly the same with the knife blade in a serger. Then there's a little other knob in here on this one. I'm gonna talk a bit this later. So let me go to the next one. Well, cool thing with the Baby Lock sergers is that since they've been doing the sergers the longest than any other sewing machine company, we have the easiest threading, and this patent that was the jet air threading, that was the one long time ago developed, and that patent has already expired. So there are lots of other companies now copying this part. But this just shows that why it is so easy to thread these sergers is that we don't have to go on all the different notches and clips and things to get our loopers threaded. Also, it doesn't care what order we thread it, because the threads can only go on those tubes in the right position. So that was the really coolest thing they came up originally with the jet air threading. Now several machines we also have the push button threading, which is the extraordinary threading, and that will tell the motor that pushes that air through. The next thing what Baby Lock came with was the automatic thread delivery, and that is still an exclusive feature on some of the Baby Lock models.
Let me show a little live demo of, on some examples how we can pin and use pins with the sergers. In a serger, we definitely need to protect the knife. Even in a sewing machine, I don't like to sew over pins, because some point that needle's gonna hit the pin and it's gonna definitely damage the needle in the machine, but in the worst case, do some damage on the machine also. So I never like to sew over pins. But sergers even more important, because if I sew over this pin, I'm gonna damage the knife definitely. And if I'm lucky, I only damage the moving knife, but sometimes may even damage the stationary knife and have to replace both. Some examples or some instructions, they tell you to pin on the side. So that way, when I be searching, my knife would never go even close to the pin. But I often like to pin a little bit closer to this edge. So I like using these large flower head pins, and I'm right-handed. So when I put my pin on the top of the fabric, so I'll take a bit more care when pinning. I put it on the top, and then when I'm approaching the knife, I can easily pull it out and put it onto my pin cushion. So I usually have a pin cushion with some of these large flower head pins beside my machine. Where I see sometimes in the classes that a pin was caught in a knife is that we'll be using some of the smaller pins. and maybe stuck, then put it on the side, flip the fabric over, and now when I'm stitching, I may not even see that little pin, especially if my fabric has a pattern on it. So I like to make sure that all my pins are on the top side, and also if possible I use these much longer pins because they are easier to see. But really, the knife savers are these clips. The clover clips, they come on different sizes. But this one, if I put the clip to hold the edges, I will never sew over that one because it is so obvious and I think the knife would almost push it out. But these are really great knife savers. So those are just some of the tips how we can keep the knife safe.
Well, sewing machines, especially the newer computerized sewing machines, we have hundreds and hundreds of decorative stitches. And if you don't like any of those stitches, we can make our own stitches on the Brother machines. We can combine stitches together. We can adjust the stitches. So lots of options. Sergers, not so many. But what we can do with those few stitches is amazing because the stitch looks very different than your sewing machine stitch. But also the decorative threads that we can use in the loopers just really give an amazing effect. So here's just some pictures that I taken from the manuals, just to show in the pictures how they would look like on the stitches. And on this first class, I'll be really just talking about the 4-thread overlock, which is the kind of a basic overlock stitch that are used, and that's how the several machines come as threaded when they come from the factory. Then we have also 3-thread stitches, wider and narrower, 3-thread narrow hem, rolled hem. These 3-thread stitches I cover on number 2 class. And then I'll also on that number 3 class mention a little bit about the 3-thread flat lock stitch. But really on the number 3 class, we go through a lot more on the techniques we can do with the 2-thread flat lock stitches, because we can also search in our searchers with the only 2 threads, 1 needle and a lower looper. So here's some examples on those ones. And then a variation on the 2-thread flat lock stitches are the blanket and the ladder stitches. And then baby lock are several models. We have an exclusive wave stitches. And there are multiple versions of that wave stitch. We actually have 4 different versions on that one. But that's only those machines that have a little wave button on the front of the machine. So they started from Imagine Wave, Evolve Wave, and then Evolution, Enlighten, Ovation, Triumph. Several searchers have this feature. Accolade also, and Acclaim now the new models. Then if you have a machine that does a cover stitch only, or you have the 8-thread searcher, we can also do cover stitches. And these ones are covered on the number 4 class. So I'm not going to go any more detail on those, but we have 3 different versions of a cover stitches and then a chain stitch. And then if you have an 8-thread searcher, which are only the baby lock, Evolve, Evolution, Accolade, Ovation, and Triumph, those models I can also combine any overlock stitch with any on the cover stitches or chain stitches, and that gives us 87 stitch combinations. Yep, we got quite many stitches then on those 8-thread searchers. Let's see what came with your machine. Well, every searcher comes with a little bit of a different set of accessories. Certain ones are in every machine, but some of the ones may have extras and some may not. I'm using the picture taken from the manual on my Triumph machine because it has most of the ones that anyone else has also. So the best thing is always to go on your machine's manual, and there in the beginning there is a section that says included accessories. They also list on that one where those pieces can be found. So if you have a brand new machine and you're taking it out of the box, it may say that some of the accessories or the things, they are included in the accessory compartment. Some of the ones are in the accessory packet. Some of them may already been attached to the machine. Some may be in a packing box. And then there are a couple little screws that may be on a sewing table. So they tell where you can find those. And often I get the question is, well, I didn't get all of those pieces when I got my machine. And I said, well, did you look the accessory compartment? And then People ask, where is that? So here's a picture showing that we have a little secret compartment in our machine just under the thread stand. This picture is from the Triumph, but the same way it is also on the Ovation and Acclaim. This little lever, just you pull it from the back, and it opens a little compartment that we can uh, uh, get our accessories. All the other models, this compartment opens from the front, but it is in the same location. So there's a little plastic pouch that has several little pieces. I emptied that little plastic pouch, and I keep on this compartment all those tools that I frequently use on my Serger. The ones that I don't use so often, I keep them still on this accessory packet in my drawer. So there are certain things that come, and obviously we have a manual, which I was referring to, but there's also another piece of cardboard there, the cardstock. There's a quick reference guide, and I'll be using this a lot because that shows the settings and the threading for all the different stitches, or most common stitches at least. So it is a really handy reference. So if you ever lose this one, no worry, we can always order you a new hard copy of that one, or you can also go to the Babylock website and download the PDF file for it, and even print one in large version. So that is something that don't worry, if you dock edit or if it gets worn out, we can always get a replacement one way or another. Then we have a power cord and a foot pedal. Some of the models, these two are connected together, but on the Ovation and Triumph, they come as two separate pieces. Then if you have an 8-thread serger, it comes also with the sewing table, and the screws are attached on that one. We'll talk about that on a number 4 class. And then we have some additional things. We have packs of needles. We have a little brush in the needle threader, and then there's a little extra needle threader here. Then there are some screwdrivers, depending on the machine. Some of the ones will come with an Allen key and a small screwdriver. Some of the machines will come with the small, like I said, a small screwdriver and then a large screwdriver. We all have a large one. And there's tweezers, replacement blade. And then there are various tools in here that can be used for the different threads, and I'll talk about those later. Then there's a threading wire. This is something to be used with the really thick threads. Again, I'll cover this one on number 2 class. So I had to kind of split things on the different classes a little bit. But then on my Triumph and also Ovation Serger came with 2 gray large spool caps, also spool holders. And then we have either 4 or 8 cone holders for the cone threads. So again, depending if you have a 4-thread serger, you get 4 of those. If you have an 8-thread serger, you get 8. Ovation and the Triumph came also with the knee lever. And then the Triumph comes with a little needle threader assist, because we have also an air threading. This kind of a threader assist is also for the Acclaim. And then all the sergers come with 1 foot only. I'll later talk in here about what other things we have available. Then there is a plastic cover that you can put over your machine. I don't really like, actually, well, I don't like it because Alan doesn't like it. We live in Florida, close to ocean. The air is a little bit corrosive. So using that kind of a plastic cover on a warm machine causes condensation. So it's not very good. So my little plastic cover is still in the original package and folded up in my drawer. I made a cover out of fabric. So that's the one I put on my machine on the times that I go on vacation. And then we may also have, at least several machines come with a little bolt and a washer. So in case if you wanted to bolt your machine permanently on a table, you can use that one also. I have the koala cabinet on mine that holds my serger perfectly in place, so I don't need to use that in my machine. But several accessories come with the machine, and some of these ones when we start using will become more obvious where they're used. I'm in my sewing room in front of my Triumph serger. I have mine on a koala cabinet, so it has a built-in
place for the trims, all the fabric clippings, the cats in a plastic pack. But you can also get the trim pin that will help to keep all your pieces not falling on the floor. And because I have a Triumph, it also has a knee lever, so I have that plugged in. And I just turned the machine on. It's not threaded at the moment. I'm gonna go through the threading. But some of the things that I mentioned that comes with the machine. So if you have an 8-thread serger, you may have a sewing table. We're not gonna be using that on this class, so I will put that aside. And then also some of the pieces that I mentioned that come with is a cover, which again, I'm not using this one. I made my own because it's just a little plastic cover. I have a lot prettier one. I'll throw that away. There's the pouch, the accessory pouch that has the thread nets, some of the spool caps, even has the bolt that I could mount my machine on the table. But because I have a cap in it, it's built for it. I don't need that one. So that my machine is neatly it stays in place even if I run it fast. Several of these pieces, I've taken some of them out because I've been using a lot of decorative threads recently. You may see some samples behind of the shirt, so I put just to show. And some of those ones that I've been using are these spool caps and foam pads. So I'll show a little bit later how these are used. But also, I have some of these spool caps, the cone holders in place also. I've been using a lot of spools that has a smaller hole, so I've been taking these ones out. But if I use the spool that the normal cone, I would want to have this in. So whenever you take these out, they're pretty tightly attached. So you have to kind of rotate and kind of pull it out. If you just kind of slightly put it on the machine, put your spool on and lift it up, you may kind of wonder what happened to my cone holder. I lost it. Well, it may be stuck inside of inside the spool. So anytime when you can take the spool out, you may want to check to see that did I leave accidentally one of those inside. That's the question every once in a while I get. So I try to address some of those questions. Some of the other important pieces that come with the machine, the quick reference guide. So I had kind of snuck it under my table, and that is where we can check on the threading and the checklist where before going through the threading. And of course the manual that has a lot of good information. Mine happened to be the 50th anniversary, so I even have a little certificate for that one on my Triumph. Put those aside. And then we have the accessory compartment. And I've taken my little plastic pouch out and put the pieces right onto the folder, on the compartment, the things that I normally use. Even added the little snips, which are great for clipping the thread tails. And I have packs of needles that I'll be using. So I have several of those pieces on my compartment ready to use. And so some of the other pieces that the machine may have come with, if you have a Triumph or a Claim, it came with a little needle threading guide. Mine is still in the back, and here's also my little pouch that those accessories on the compartment came with. I just stuck it there. I'll show how to use this one on those machines as well.
Then there are lots of additional accessories available. And one thing to point out is that when you look the wall of all the different feet and accessories in the Quilts and Lace store, you see different packages. But cool thing is how Babylock has done these ones is that they're all color coded. So if you have a Babylock automatic thread delivery serger, not the really basic like the Victory and Lauren, Diana, not those ones, but these ones that are what we refer as a Japanese-made sergers. If you have a 4-thread serger, the packages on the feet and accessories have a pink background. So here's a couple examples of some of the foot kits that made for some of those 4-thread sergers. If you have an 8-thread serger, those packages have a green background. So very easy to color code to see which one works on your machine. Because you can't mix and match. They won't work on the different ones. It's just that there are two different types of machines that we can't use them on interchangeably. So 4-thread sergers, pink, green packages for the 8-thread. Then when we have machines that don't fall into those categories, like the cover stitch only machine, And then also those other models that I mentioned earlier, like the Victory and Diana, Lauren, those packages have an orange background. However, there are also some orange backgrounds on the Baby Lock Sassy accessories. But ask the shop, we can help you with if you need an accessory for those models. But they have an orange background. So that's a quick way to look. Baby Lock sewing machine attachments and feet, they have a blue background. So all color coded for easy access. Other really handy accessories for your searches is to add a trim bin to catch all these cutouts that when we search. I have a koala cabinet that has a built-in trim bin and a little plastic bag that catches all the little pieces that are cut out. And then also, if you don't have a koala cabinet or your searcher is not inserted in a cabinet, you can also get an extension table that is made for the searcher. Again, we need to know your model so that it is cut out for perfectly for that searcher. So it'll give you a little extension area for larger pieces. Well, all these feet that are attached, they are snap-on feet. And that is a question I often get is, how do you change this one? So in the back of the foot, there's a little metal lever, just tiny little lever. If you lift your pressure foot up and push that lever, your foot will just fall off. And because there are lots of springs and extra pieces here, your tendency is to try to pull this foot towards you and it kind of gets stuck. So the best way is to either, like the manual has, is that they even lock down the blade and then lift the pressure foot up, rotate it around and get it out. Well, I normally take the foot in and out just kind of from the left side of the machine. And I'll show this in a little live video of how I take the foot in and out. But there's the instructions I put here from the manual. So try different ways. But and after you change your feet few times, it becomes the second nature. In the beginning, it just always kind of a struggle when something's new. But after you do it few times, often on my number 3 class, where we use a lot of different feet and accessories, people say after the class to me that, well, at least I learned to change the feet on my machine this time. But it's like anything, when we use multiple times, it gets easier. The machine, as it comes with one foot, and here's a picture of the my Triumph foot. Depending on the machine, it just looks a little bit different, but no matter which model you have, the feet there has some slots, there are some openings for the putting a tape. And very last exercise on this class, we actually use that slot. But also all the feet, they have little raised marks that will indicate where your needle will be lining up. So that's kind of, again, like that road instead of the hood ornament. So when I want to line up, I'll either watch the knife blade, or then sometimes I'll watch these raised edges where the needles would be lining up. If you have an 8-thread searcher, which have places for 5 needles, we have 5 notches. If you have a 4-thread searcher, you'll have those last 2, right 2 notches for your needle positions. Well, then, talking about needles, that is still the most important and the cheapest part of the machine. Yes, they do dull out and we need to replace them often. Well, the question often is, what kind of needle do I put on this machine? Because in our shop, we have, I think, 6 different types of searcher needles. Because some of the older models, they had very, very unique, special kind of needles for those. So if you have an older model, best thing would be also to check your machine's manual to see what is the needle system. And that is a funny looking number. Like here's some examples: HAX1SP-CR, ELX705CF, maybe saying 137.058. That's the needle system. That just means that the needle has been made with certain length and whether it has the scarf or not, and the flat shank or round shanks. And so it's a needle system. So that is the most important part on sewing machines, and also especially for searchers, because the older models had all kinds of specialty ones. Well, on the current models, we really have 2 types. if you have a four-thread serger, your needle system will say HAX1SP. CR means it's a chrome coated. If you had an 8-thread serger, they came with the ELX705. And how do I find this? Yes, the manual has that information, but also if you open the front cover, so if you look the front cover of your machine, it'll show either kind of a raised printing or even a sticker, so what kind of a needle system is recommended. If it says ELX705, then that will mean that this is the needles I can use in any position on that serger, overlock and a cover stitch side. But in the overlock side, I can also use the standard household sewing machine needles, which is the needle system 13705. Also, if I have a 4-thread serger, that HA1XP is really the same needle system as the 13705H. So overlock side, I can use standard household sewing machine needles, those coding, those needle systems. Cover stitch side, you need to use this needle. And I have a next slide showing what is unique on this needle. So the needle system is printed in the machine and when you open the front cover. And then one of the things in the manual, they recommend to use the organ or Smets brands. But we also have been using a lot of the Class C needles, so all of those brands were great. Organ is just a manufacturer, the same as Smets. The needles that come with the machine are made by Organ manufacturer. It's a Japanese needle company. The sergers are made in Japan, so they put those needles in. But the important thing is then after you have the right needle system is to use the correct size of the needle. Some of the needles only come on 2 sizes. So the general rule applies as in a sewing machine is if you have a heavier fabric, you need to put the larger needle, the bigger number on that needle. Or if you put heavier thread, you also need that thicker needle for that one. The only limitation we have in sergers is that we can't put anything larger than 9014. So even on the overlock side that I could use a household sewing machine needle, I can't put anything larger than 9014. That's a general rule for all the sergers in the market, no matter who made it. Because the way the serger operates, those loopers go very, very close to the needle. So if I put the thicker needle, my looper starts getting too close to it, maybe even rubbing into it. The same reason, I really shouldn't put anything smaller than 7511. I have sometimes used 70, but then you may run into risk of having skip stitches because now the needle is so thin, the loopers go too far away from it and may not catch the thread. So the range that we have in the sergers is a little bit smaller than a sewing machine, but we can still put a stop stitch needle for heavier threads, and we can put on the overlock side and or jeans needle if I'm sewing or something a little bit denser fabric. I use a lot of the microtex needles because they're very sharp on the woven fabrics, and I may put a ballpoint needle onto the sewing on the knit fabrics. The needles that come with the machine, that HAX, SP, and the ELX705s, those ones are light ballpoint needles. They kind of designed that you can sew most woven and you can sew most knit fabrics too. But if you have very delicate knit, I may go even jersey or ballpoint needle then on those fabrics. Well, here's the example, but the picture. What describes what is special about this ELX705 CF and compared to normal household sewing machine needle? Again, this ELX705 needle is only used in the 8-thread sergers and definitely needed for the cover stitch side, but you can use it any place. The only difference on that needle and your normal universal needle is that instead of just having one groove in the front of the needle, this needle has a groove in the front and the back. So there's a little groove in the back also to accommodate the stitching when we do the cover stitches. So that is unique on that needle. So if I put an ordinary needle on a cover stitch side, I probably get skip stitches. How do I change those needles? Depending on the machine, you may have normal screws, 2 screws, which is normally those 4-thread sergers. If you have an 8-thread serger, you need the Allen key to access those tiny little screws that hold the needles in place. And there's a little letter C for the cover stitch side, 1, 2, 3, and then overlock side O, 1, and 2. So that will show that the left needle is the O1 needle, the right needle is the O2 needle. And the important thing is that when you insert the needle is loosen the screw a little bit and use that brush needle inserter tool to hold the needle and go straight up. That is a unique in the baby lock sergers is that the needles go straight up. They are not in an angle. So when I push that needle all the way up, I need to see it on this little picky window. If I don't see the butt of the needle there, it's not all the way up and you won't get a good stitch. So important, insert needle all the way in. And then tighten the screw tightly. All except the acclaim, ovation, and triumph. Also, if you take a needle out, you need to make sure you tighten those screws. The acclaim, triumph, and ovation has a little guide in here, a guard that prevents the screw falling out if you forgot to tighten it. But all these others, if you're only using one needle, remember to tighten that screw back. Otherwise, when the machine vibrates, it may fall out. They do include on those machines 2 extra screws for each needle, each screw type. That way, in case if you lose one, there is a replacement. And we also have them in a shop, normally in our service area in a shop too, if you run out. But on the models that have this little screw guard, they won't even come with spares because those needle screws won't fall out. So don't unscrew that little Phillips kind of a screw head because that is just holding that guide in place. So leave that alone. Those little black dots on the 8-thread sergers are the ones where you will use the Allen key to replace your needles. What kind of threads can we use in a serger? Well, I mentioned earlier that we can use all kinds of specialty threads. When I got my first serger, and that was way long time, that was most likely about over 30 years ago anyway, there were no YouTubes to learn and not that much in the shops either. So I learned a lot of things from the books and the manuals. So first when I got it, I saw in the shops that they had serger thread. And I thought, well, it's a serger, I need to use a serger thread. Later on, I discovered that I have a lot more options than just your normal serger thread. We just often use these serger threads that come on the big cones because there's a lot of thread. That's all-purpose polyester thread. It's a little bit thinner maybe than your sewing machine all-purpose thread, but it's a very strong thread for garment sewing. So I use that a lot. But then we can also use all kinds of specialty threads. And your machine manual, again, I refer that manual because it has a lot of information. So there is a specialty thread guide. And I just copied a little section on my machine manual on this slide. So it shows there what kind of application, what kind of stitch I'll be doing, what kind of threads are recommended in different places. So it just keeps going. I just have a section showing on this image. But sometimes it may say that certain threads only used in the loopers. That means those are too thick to put through the eye of the needle. Or they may say that certain types of threads are certain techniques are not recommended. So that's a good starting point. And on some of the classes, I'll be going through on also how we use some of those really thick decorative threads. Then depending on your type of spool, some of the spools, these cones, because they pick hole in the middle. So we'll be using the cone holders that already come in the machine attached. So those cone holders just give more support for the spool so it will stay neatly in place. So those are designed with the large spools. If you use standard household threads, they have a little shoulder which a thread could get caught. So in that cases, we would want to put the little cap on the top and the little foam pad on the bottom. So these are for your standard household spools. If you have a thread that is very slippery, some of those embroidery threads, metallic threads, they may want to start pulling out of the spool and catch underneath the spool. Those ones you want to use the thread net. Don't use it on your normal serger thread. They just add extra tension and we don't need that. Your ordinary all-purpose polyester or cotton threads, those ones are well behaving. They kind of cling into the spool. But the slippery metallic rayon, some of those threads, they kind of slide off on your shirt. So that keeps that thread hugged against the spool. So use those thread nets with those kind of threads. Then I mentioned in here good quality versus poor quality. Well, you've got the Ferrari. Don't put low octane gas on it. Meaning, I spent lots of time on doing my projects, so I don't want to spend time on a poor quality thread. I have an example of when I later show that on a thread that is not so good quality. I bought that long time ago because that was the time I didn't realize that I can use also ordinary household spools. So I bought a big Serger cones or red thread for some Christmas projects that I did. Well, I don't use much red thread on people who know me. I'm kind of a black, white, gray, and beige person. So I still have three cones of that old Serger thread. So I bought on one of the big box shops, like it must be about 30 years ago, this spool of thread, three spools of thread that were very cheap. And oh boy, yeah, are they horrible threads. One of the educators we had doing a Serger event in a shop, she was referring this as just remember what is holding the seam on the back of your pants together when you bend in a car park to pick up the keys from the floor, from the ground. So if your thread snaps easy, it's not going to hold the seam very well either.
What kind of threads we can use in a Serger? Well, we really have a lot of choices. When I first got my Serger, I thought that I always had to use Serger threads because it's a Serger and there were threads sold for Sergers. Well, yes, absolutely. These are great threads and I use this a lot. They come in a cones, they are large cones, 3,000 or 3,000 yards or meters, usually a lot of thread in those ones. They're all-purpose polyester. This one is from Superior Threads. And I had to laugh because when I got this thread, it came with the Surgeon General warnings saying that the use of this product while searching may cause happiness, excitement, pleasure, and joy. Long-term use of this product has been known to reduce stress, and use only searching machinery while using this product may lead to finished projects. So I kind of laughed because first time I got the warning about the thread. But it's just a good reminder that there is a difference on good thread and not so good thread. Most likely you won't see well in the camera, but this one is one of those bargain bin threads that I had got on me. It's very fuzzy and uneven. So it's just one of those threads I've had years and years and years before I knew any better. Then there are, other than the Surgeon General thread, Madeira makes really good Serger thread also. I use quite a bit Madeira threads too. They also come on all kinds of variegated. These bigger cone threads, we have a bigger opening on these ones. So this is where you want to use the cone holders. So when I put the cone holder in a machine and I put my spool, it will hold the spool nicely in place. If when you first get the machine, these are really tight. So you may have to rotate to get them out. And if you just put it slightly, and you put your spool on, then you take the spool out, what may happen is that this cone may stay inside. If that happens, then just before you discard the spool, check that there's not a cone holder inside. I got a few questions about that one. Then, like I said, we have a Madeira ones. They also are available on the smaller cones, like I have on this one. Those are all-purpose threads. But I can also use ordinary household spools. Like this one is just an ordinary cotton thread. Because this spool has a little lip, and sometimes there are little rough spots on those ones. So to make things easier, I'm gonna use some of these spool caps. So I would put my cap on the top, the one without the sponge. Will go in the bottom, and that will go on my spool pin, and this top will direct the thread away from the cone. That way nothing catches if there's any rough spots, and it just gives more smoother delivery for thread. Because anytime if there's a hiccup on the thread delivery, that will cause a little hiccup on the stitches as well. The Triumph and Ovation also came with a little bit larger space. So when I'm using some of these very slippery threads, like embroidery thread, I can put this one to give a bigger base. But maybe even better would be to put the thread net over this one if I start seeing it pulling out. But yep, we can also use machine embroidery threads. They have nice shine on these ones and make really pretty stitches. One of the first kind of specialty threads that I used was woolly nylon. There are other brands other than the woolly nylon. Madeira also has one, and then there's a Maxilog has the one also. They are made out of nylon. This one is polyyarn. That is a fuzzy kind of thread, but it is made out of polyester. Just has a little bit higher heat tolerance. This thread is kind of that little stretchy thread, but it is glittery. That is called the Snazzy Lock, one of my favorite threads. Makes really, really pretty stitches, and there's a lot on this spool. I've been using this in several projects, but there's still a lot of thread on that one. And then, of course, we can have all kinds of other glittery threads. This one is a Wild Eye Candlelight. It's very, very thick thread. Only in the loopers I can use that one. This one is a little bit thinner. That's a Wild Eye, Superior Threads Halo. And it just, again, works greatly on the loopers. Well, then, going a little bit thicker threads. This one is Jean Stitch, which is top stitching thread. It's almost like a 12-weight cotton, which this one is a 12-weight cotton. This is polyester, that's cotton. These work great both in the needles and the loopers. If I use them in the overlock side in the needles, I may want to put just a little bit larger top stitching needle in the machine, like 9014 top stitch needle. Then that's the other 12-weight threads are also one of my new favorites is the Madeira Decora. This is a 12-weight rayon, beautiful thread. I was using this quite a bit recently on some of the projects. This is another Madeira thread, Madeira Lana. It is about the same weight as a 12-weight cotton, but this is a little bit fuzzier. It has it's made out of wool and acrylic, so it's a great matte, kind of a little bit heavier thread. And then if we want to go even thicker threads, I could use the Madeira Decora number 6. This is much, much thicker. And I had used the red and the yellow on this little basket. So that is that really heavy. The one that I have on the chain looper is this thickness, even thicker than the this Decora. This one is a Madeira Cotona number 4. It is really thick thread. So thick that I have to bypass my threading ports to use this thread. But it makes beautiful stitches on the edge as an edge finish. Of course, we can also use pearl cotton. Pearl Crown Rayon is a rayon version of it, a little bit more shine. So all of these work greatly in the loopers. And then I do like some of the shiny pieces, shiny things also. Well, this thread is a metallic thread. But this is not round thread, this is flat. And sometimes some of these metallic threads just need to be treated properly. So this specific one needs to be spinning. So if I put it on my normal spool stand, every revolution will make a twist. Eventually it's all twisted up. So this is where I like to use my thread director. I would put my spool of thread and cap just loosely so that my spool doesn't fall off, but it still lets it spin. And then I can put my thread director to the machine and thread the machine, and now my spool would be spinning if I don't catch it on there.